to today's podcast, which is part of a series we're running with agency directors on the big challenges facing our industry. Today we're joined by Adam Clarke of Reload Digital, a leading digital agency specialising in e-commerce, to talk about the growing role of data and performance metrics and some of the challenges this abundance of information can present. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks Dan. Thank you very much for having me on. At Reload, I am General Manager for our EMEA region. Reload have offices across the world. We help grow e-commerce and retail brands. So my role is effectively heading up the team over this side and working across a range of brands and our leadership team over here.
Now, of course, you work with lots of big e-commerce brands, and one of the big advantages must be the financial measurability of the work that you do. Does that ever risk encouraging something of a short-term mentality in favour of perhaps building longer-term strategies for those brands?
Yes, it's interesting. There's almost too much data, too much information that I guess e-commerce brands can have, particularly compared to other businesses. As a bit of a data geek myself, I do have to say I love it. I think having that visibility is a blessing. I think you're right though. At times, if we look at how we report on the brands that we work with and the businesses we work with, it is now becoming a kind of a daily focus. It's almost like how the news cycle has changed. It used to be what newspapers that people would read in the morning. Now it's a 24/7 news cycle, and it's kind of like that with the data and the reporting on the e-commerce side, I'd say. So at times, I think there's a worry that people are making decisions that maybe aren't too smart. Just because the data is coming in thick and fast. So I think brands do need to be aware of that and make sure that I guess they've got a good decision-making process in place when trying to kind of look at the financial data and the performance data they're looking at.
Does that obsession with data, and as you say, obviously there's good reason for it, but does that fixation on data, can that ever undermine the creative process? I mean, after all, it can tell us perhaps how successful we were with the things that we did in the past, but it can't tell us how successful we could have been with other ideas, or indeed what we should be doing in 12, 24 months from now. Is there ever a danger that this access to data narrows our vision too much?
Yeah, I think so. If I were to look at it, I think the creative one is an interesting one because so often, that there are kind of poles apart when it comes to creating, a unique idea, maybe for a new campaign or a new marketing message. Often that is done with some data at the start. You look at audiences, you do some market research, you try and hone in on who you're talking to. But then that process of actually creating that message, it's a very different type of process. So when it comes to reporting on that, I think it is hard often to know how successful that was compared to other ideas that you could have come up with in the ideation process. I think what I'd say is I guess data is never a bad thing, but I think it's how you actually review it and how you make decisions from it. Too often, I think people can get tripped up by interpreting data in the wrong way, or looking at things that actually aren't as important. I think also looking ahead, as you kind of the question you asked, I think if we look at even just kind of the US election, I think is a great example of this, of people trying to kind of use data to forecast out what's going to happen in the future, and how tricky that was, and how incorrect that polling data and things like that are. It's very hard thing to do to kind of look ahead to the next kind of couple of weeks and years using the data that you've got. And I think so everything needs to be taken with a bit of a pinch of salt, I'd say.
Are there any performance metrics that you think can help strike this balance? Metrics that may sit somewhere between, along that spectrum. On the one end of the spectrum, short-term tactical sales efforts. At the other end, the more kind of strategic brand objectives. Are there any metrics that you think can help strike that balance?
Yeah, I think if I look at this in terms of the metrics that we deal with on a daily basis, Obviously, at the bottom of the funnel, we're talking about ROAS, return on ad spend. We're looking at kind of new acquisition customer rate and repeat customer rate, that kind of thing. And more, it's looking at up the funnel at ways to to use metrics that are more accountable and impactful. Because I think a lot of businesses and brands we work with, they kind of get a bit fed up of the fluff. They don't like it when if we do a big sort of programmatic or big media campaign, and all we're talking about is impressions, or all we're talking about is the number of people that engage with the ad. They want to see how many people actually kind of visited the site. What was the potential of new business and customer acquisition off the back of it? And so what we try and do is look at the ways that, okay, what do we expect of somebody who has, it might be an out of home billboard, it might be a Instagram story. Now, what is the expectation of that person at that point? We're not expecting them to purchase or make an inquiry if it's maybe a B2B kind of customer journey. But what are we expecting of them? And that's where we use things like leading indicators. We call them success metrics. And it could be things like visiting the website and consuming 3 or 4 pages of information. Potentially, if it's an e-commerce store, visiting a product page, adding something to their cart. There's lots of, I guess, indicators that we can use to determine if, yes, somebody, I guess, didn't check out or didn't inquire, but do they have all the hallmarks of somebody that is likely to over time? So more and more trying to kind of look at, I guess, it's not just black and white, look at those grey areas in between.
Something that I've found, I don't know if you'd relate to this or maybe kind of challenge this thesis, but something that I've found is because we, as you say, we have access to so much data all the time, and we're reporting it on an increasingly frequent basis. Sometimes it's almost tempting to kind of hide behind that data, and if it's favourable, we take credit. If it's not so encouraging, then we sort of panic and try and find some excuses. I think very often this needs to be perhaps balanced with a focus on inputs as well as outputs. What are the big strategic milestones, the big tangible things we're going to achieve, be it over the next quarter, 6 months, whatever, that will then in turn lead to those favourable KPIs further down the road. I wonder what your perspective is on that. So balancing out a focus on metrics with actually a focus on getting big strategic stuff done in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. I think your point is so valid in terms of people, framing data in a way that makes what they want it to make looks good, and maybe ignoring kind of what the data is actually telling them. I think that is a big part of how smart businesses and smart brands approach data. It is with a little bit of a going in with their eyes open to what they may find. And I think what we try and do for the clients we work with is just use it to spot opportunities, and try and go in, and we do something called kind of second pair of eyes, a SPO, where even if we were working with the client for a long time, we ask somebody in the team that maybe isn't as familiar to jump on and have a look with fresh eyes at what they're seeing, to try and spot those opportunities. In terms of the kind of how do you make sure that you're looking at the things that you can do along the way to get you to that kind of end goal, I think that's such a good point. This is why things like OKRs have become so popular, and that kind of more long-term planning has become very popular with those KPIs along the way, because it's so easy, particularly with the brands and clients that we work with, to get caught up in the weekly reports, and what we really need to be doing is thinking about, okay, so what do we need to do in terms of growing the business in the short term? So what are the immediate priorities? Here's where we work to kind of allowable customer acquisition costs or allowable cost per lead costs. But it's also thinking, okay, in a year's time, what are the things that the brand or the business we're working with needs to achieve? And that could be growing its social offering. It could be bringing more people to the informational parts of the website, so they're not just pushing product or inquiries. So it is trying to balance, I guess, those short-term and long-term, metrics.
Do you find that the job title of the primary point of contact makes a difference here? So if you're dealing with somebody who perhaps in a really big organization might be several tiers down from the top, and they might be under quite a lot of pressure to hit certain short-term metrics, and in turn they therefore need to pass that pressure onto you. Whereas if you're dealing with somebody more senior, who might be at liberty to take more of a strategic, longer term view on things, do you find that affects where the focus is placed at all?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think there's a couple of things to that. There's definitely the job role itself. Different roles naturally, have different responsibilities, and different things that need to be reported on. So I think you are right in saying that, a day-to-day content that we may have, it could be a marketing exec or marketing manager, or it could be kind of a more specialist position, an internal SEO manager, something like that. They'll have a completely different set of things that they're interested in looking at, compared to a CEO or an MD, or e-commerce director who is not as obsessed maybe at the detail, but can look a bit further ahead. I'd actually say though more it's less about job title and role, but an outlook. So it is what's that person's experience. You can see it a lot by the difference between people that maybe have had agency experience versus in-house, or a different, particularly a different vertical or industry. We often see very big differences in, say, the fashion brands that we work with. Particularly maybe it's a fast fashion brand versus something maybe travel, where it's a completely different seasonal cycle. And so I'd actually say it's more their expertise, to that point, the experience they've had, that informs what they almost go looking for, and the data that they seek versus the data they don't seek.
I wonder if you feel any of this has kind of changed at all in recent years. I mean, do you see a certain trend? Has your attitude itself perhaps evolved somewhat? 5 years ago, are there certain things that you don't do now that you did do back then? Like, do you feel like there's a certain journey that you've gone through and certain lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, I would say that the thing that we've noticed the most is firstly just the thirst for data. You can see that, in terms of, I guess, the conversation we're having now and the conversations we have with our clients. More and more, having a report that's PDF'd and sent across every 3 months or every month, it doesn't kind of cut the mustard anymore. I think a lot of clients want access to the information a lot quicker. And so that is definitely what it's done, is it's given people more data more frequently. But I think more and more there's a slight backlash to that. Data on its own is pointless. It's basically the difference between having a load of words and not kind of putting it into a story, telling a story with it. And I think that's what more and more clients want to see, is they want to see what is the data actually telling them, what are the key trends, what do they need to do as a result of that data. And so I think the biggest thing we've noticed is the importance of that. Making sure that everything we're doing has a conclusion, has a takeaway point, because I think marketers, they need more and more answers. They don't just want the data in the first place. And I think the second thing that we've definitely noticed is, and it comes back to what we were saying a minute ago, different roles and different people require different things. And so almost giving the same four people in a business the same report, I don't know if that works anymore. I think the importance of good reporting is taking data, and giving that intelligence, that business intelligence, to the right people, and only giving them what they need to see. And so, I think more and more what we've seen, the importance of the ability to not just have the data in the first place and to be able to pull it together, but tell a story with it and present it in a palatable way that is actually quite actionable. I'd be interested in your thoughts on some of these topics. Like how have you seen things change from your side?
Yeah, we tend to deal a lot with business owners or senior decision makers within slightly smaller companies, I think, and therefore these individuals have really, really short attention spans. There's probably two or three metrics they really care about, and they're interested in what it means, as you've alluded to, and what those actions will then look like over a relatively short period of time. So I think we've for quite a long time had a big focus on that very frequent communication of a very small number of kind of pre-agreed, quite strategic KPIs, along with a kind of relentless focus on quarterly strategic objectives. Because I'm just a big believer that if we always take the attitude that, look, in 3 months from now we're going to have achieved three, four, five things that are going to have shifted the brand universes beyond where it is today, then the KPIs are going to take care of themselves. And yes, you'll have good weeks and bad weeks, and broader economic factors that may filter down or whatever. But it's about, in my mind, it's about not getting distracted by that. Just being laser clear on what are those big strategic items that we need to tick off. So I think that's been our focus for a little while, but I think we're still playing around with exactly how we do deliver that to clients. As you've said, different people need it in different ways. For someone, it may be a 30, 40 page PDF that they want because they're really interested in the detail, particularly if they're say a marketing manager themselves. Whereas a business owner or a kind of C-suite director may want a text message, or it could be anything in between on that spectrum. So it's just, as you say, it's about treating individuals as individuals and making those smart decisions rather than just kind of shoehorning everyone into the same category. I certainly think we've got a way to go. We've got some ideas about how we can improve this further, and it's reassuring to hear that you're you're probably a lot further along, I suspect, but it's reassuring to hear that you're broadly thinking the same things.
Yeah, well, I also think, as I said, it does come down to personal preference of these things. And I think, if as a marketer you are comfortable with the numbers and familiar with that, you're going to spend more time deciphering it and that kind of thing. Whereas, if you're more of a creative person, more brand led, you're kind of less so. And I think it's just trying to find that balance between both of those worlds, isn't it?
I would suggest as well that maybe some channels are, by their very nature, more short term than others. That's a huge generalization. But I wonder, are there any particular channels that you try to bring your customers back to and say, look, let's, like, all these channels are really important, but actually these two or three strategically, this is where we can build serious long term kind of assets. I'd just be interested, particularly with you having such a strong focus on e-commerce, if you have any particular kind of channel focus in that respect.
Yes, definitely. The thing with that, I think, is there's definitely channels that if you can grow it over time, will kind of reap rewards. So it completely depends on the brand and the vertical. But we work with a lot of brands that would call themselves purposeful brands. They have extremely strong brand equity engagement with their customers, and so that typically occurs across the likes of Instagram, YouTube, and kind of your stack of social channels. And so those channels that typically, yes, you will get a return on them, but maybe 2020 versus a couple of years ago, it's definitely increased the likelihood of getting a direct purchase. But what we think is important to realize is, as those channels grow, the ability then to use those audiences to drive bottom of the funnel activity. So it's not just getting that brand reach and showing somebody maybe an advert at that point. It's also by them coming onto an audience remarketing list, maybe visiting the website. Over the next kind of 2 to 3 weeks, it's not just thinking long term, but even in 2 to 3 weeks, they will then potentially become a customer because they are now on another data list and that kind of thing. So I think what we're trying to do is there's definitely channels that are more long term and brands need to focus on, but it is joining the funnel. I think too often you might do a huge media campaign that had no link to the other activity that was happening. So there could be a huge display campaign showing ads across a stack of different websites, and maybe doing some programmatic video, maybe some catch-up TV, and that would all be a completely separate entity. All the activity that was happening across SEO or PPC across Google Ads, or even say email marketing, were separate entities, probably run by different people. And so what we are trying to do more is make sure there is a holistic strategy with that, that the customers that you're targeting is quite clear, kind of what each channel is doing it and what role they have to play. Good attribution modeling as well, so that again, just because a channel doesn't deliver a direct purchase, it doesn't mean it's not doing something. So yeah, I think there's definitely there's channels out there, but it's how they all, I guess, fit into the big mix.
Because as you say, like the key there is kind of integrating it all and making sure it's all aligned. So you'll have different people who are kind of specialists in different areas, but presumably then you need, one or maybe several people kind of spearheading that who bring it all together, and presumably that therefore demands that they have a combination of left and right brain and quite a broad kind of skill set. I wonder what your thought is on individuals in that kind of role that have to bring together, because if we go back 20, 30 years, the kind of conventional marketer wouldn't necessarily we wouldn't necessarily have been talking about data and those. I mean, they probably still had an analytical mind, but maybe not in quite the same way that we're talking about today. I wonder what are the 2 or 3 traits that you might search for in the kind of individual to lead that and to bring those very different parts of the overall marketing spectrum together.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult role to hire for, whether you are agency side or in-house. We call it kind of a unicorn in terms of trying to find that person. I think realistically, you're looking for somebody that maybe they're not completely a maths genius, but they are comfortable with numbers. They can interpret data and play around with it, but they also have an appreciation of solid marketing theory and frameworks, understanding of kind of what makes a good brand versus a bad brand, and kind of that links to being able to understand customers and the audiences they're talking to. I think you are looking for somebody that potentially isn't super strong in any one of those areas, but can kind of join the dots and bring it together. Naturally, that they'll be an inquisitive person, though they will have an interest in finding out more information and digging a bit deeper. But yeah, it's not an easy role to hire for. I think what you can find though is, and we see it, if you look at successful businesses, and there's so many examples of these, there's always a range of people at the top that have grown that business. You have maybe somebody that is the financial director, and kind of heads up that side of the business. You have somebody who is the salesperson or more focused on the brand or marketing, and so it doesn't always need to just be one person. I think as long as there's an encouragement of and a dialogue there and joint decision making, I think you can have a team that has a mixture of those skills.
Yeah, certainly is a unicorn. Would agree with that. I wonder, just an extension of that question, is there one, and the answer may well be no, as you say, maybe it's just a general mix of being quite good at lots of different things, but is there one, when you look at the best marketers that you've worked with, is there one single defining trait that links all those people together?
That is a good question. I'd say it's hard with this one because we at Reload, we have as most companies do now, we have kind of clearly defined values that we look for, and they'd always be people that have clear drive and determination, people that take responsibility, people that want to collaborate and share ideas with other people. We have kind of set values, and I do think those values, if you add those into the mix, any marketer would benefit from them. I'd say a more kind of generic sweep and look at some maybe more the clients that we work with and the different businesses and brands. It completely depends on the role specifically. But when I look at the best all rounders, the people that are maybe leading an internal marketing team, they may have a data analyst, reporting into them. They might have a brand or creative person and some specialists, and they're also coordinating with an agency as well. Typically, that person has the ability to think big picture, so they can see beyond a monthly report. They can see where they want to take the marketing and the goals that they have, where they want to take that in the next 6 months and beyond. Because I think that big picture strategic thinking that allows them to make good long-term decisions. I think the people that we've worked with that have that, they always have an interest and understanding of what other brands are doing in the market. They can reel off their competitors and why they're either good or bad. So I think that's really important, and at the same time, they can look at the details and make quite quick decisions based on that. So I think the two traits that come up again and again, I would say, is that big picture thinking, and also being able to kind of not sit on a decision, be able to assess and analyze a set of data points or options on the table and make those decisions fairly quickly, because particularly in e-commerce, decisions do need to be made quickly. It can't be a case of kind of taking 2 months and having a 2-hour coffee break to make that decision.
Final question, I promise, Adam. What's the single biggest mistake that you think you've made, or if you were to go back and talk to yourself, say 8-9 years ago, and you could say one thing to that younger Adam in order to ensure that he accelerated that learning or avoided that mistake altogether, what might that be?
I think, firstly, I'm a big believer in the idea of learning from mistakes. I think one of Facebook's values is fail fast, I think, and for me that is really important, particularly if you are in a leadership position in any business. I think being able to understand where you've gone wrong, being able to listen to your team or listen to people around you, and take away the personal emotions from that, I think are vital to good decision making and that kind of thing. If I was to look back, I would probably speak to my unbearded 20-year-old self and probably say, making sure that when you are looking at any mistakes that have been made, like, look at the reasons why. I think too often you could get bad results or something could have gone wrong, and we've had it a couple of times. Say with hiring, we've done a lot of hiring the last couple of years, and we've made good decisions and bad decisions. And I think too often you're quick to make judgment on why that was maybe a bad decision or why that mistake was made. For hiring in particular, it could be because was it your interview process? Was that thorough enough? Or was it the candidates you were chatting to? Was that pool of people good enough? Could you have gone out and done a bit more there? And I think you can extrapolate that across everything. And it kind of loops back to the conversation we've had about data. It's really understanding kind of, was the strategy bad and that's why it didn't work out, or were there other factors at play? Was it more of a symptom of the situation at hand or market factors and that kind of thing? So just taking stock and not panicking and really trying to work out why that mistake was made. And once you've worked that out, it's moving quickly to play it right. So yeah, that would probably be what I'd say to my much younger self.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. Some really insightful stuff, and I've made a ton of mental notes to action. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on.